January 1919, midday, the north end of Boston basked in a rare touch of warmth, and the next moment the city heard it, the crack of metal, the snap of rivets, and then the roar of something alive breaking free. When the wall of the giant storage tank gave way, the world turned into a rushing black amber tide, thick, hot, and unstoppable. First came a deep rumble, then the impact. 15, 25 feet high, a wall of molasses surged down Commercial Street, devouring everything lighter than its weight. Moving as fast as a car, it tore doors off hinges, crushed trucks, ripped trolleys from their rails, and shattered brick as if it were sugar crust. Those who tried to run were trapped, their legs caught, their breath stuck, their screams muffled in the syrupy silence. In seconds, whole blocks turned into a sticky death trap. 21 people died, 150 were hurt, dozens of horses drowned like flies on flypaper. Death here was slow and strangely sweet. Then came the stillness, thick, heavy, and quiet, broken only by the splash of seawater pumped from the harbor to wash molasses off stone and iron ribs. For weeks, Boston Harbor stayed brown and murky. Streets stuck under the bristles of brooms. Basements reeked of syrup for months. They say the smell soaked so deep into the wood that on hot summer days it still comes back. But the real storm came on paper. The owners of the tank denied any fault, spinning stories about bombs and anarchists, feeding on the fears of the post-war years. Engineers fought back. For the first time on this scale, metallurgists, not politicians, became the key witnesses. They found thin walls, rushed construction, hidden leaks, and the merciless math of weight, pressure, and temperature. The tank had been filled almost to the brim that day. The court battles dragged on for years, and in the end it wasn't sabotage that stood in judgment, it was design failure. Out of that verdict came new safety codes and a hard-earned caution. But something still slips through. Some swore they'd heard a second blast. Others claimed they'd seen gas clouds. And a few say that, on a hot day, even now, you can still smell molasses, as if the city remembers the sweetness of its bitter mistake. With a flood once ran like a sea, life flows again. But in the quiet of evening, if you listen closely, you might catch that same low hum and wonder, what snapped the steel that day? Haste? Heat and cold? The shiver of the rails? Or a hand no one ever saw? The answer lies somewhere between a rivet and a sigh, leaving a sticky trace in memory. Spring 1865. America, exhausted after 4 years of bloody civil war, finally took a breath. Southern cities lay in ruins, but in people's hearts there was a fragile hope. The worst was over. In Mobile, a quiet port city in Alabama, men were returning home. Women were rebuilding households from ashes. The city was trying to be reborn. But peace didn't last long. Just a few weeks after the Confederacy's surrender, another apocalypse struck in a single, terrifying moment. May 26th, 1865. In the heart of Mobile, along the waterfront, massive stockpiles of ammunition were stored, remnants of the war that had just ended. More than 200 tons of deadly cargo, gunpowder, grenades, artillery shells. No one believed they were a danger, yet they turned a peaceful city into hell. In seconds, a monstrous explosion thundered. The shockwave leveled entire blocks. The ground shook like a volcanic eruption. Fire and debris roared into the sky, and the blast was heard for miles. In villages 50 miles away, windows shattered. At the site of the depot, a crater opened, deep as a 3-story building. It filled with water and for decades remained a sinister lake. A silent reminder of the moment when an entire city's life stopped. More than 300 people were killed instantly. Thousands were injured. For weeks, bodies were searched for among the ruins, often finding no trace of entire families. Where life had bustled that very morning, only charred wreckage and emptiness remained. Mobile was brought to its knees. The scale of destruction made it seem as if a new war had struck. Northern newspapers rushed to accuse former Confederates, calling it sabotage, an act of revenge. But no proof ever surfaced. It looked instead as though death had come on its own, sudden, unstoppable, almost like a warning of weapons yet to be invented. What happened in Mobile would later be compared to the first atomic blast, so immense was the power of its destruction. The city struggled for decades to recover. People rebuilt homes, tried to move forward, but the scars remained. For those who lived through the blast, the world was never the same. And yet the most haunting part of this story isn't only in the number of victims or even the force of the explosion. It lies in the mystery it left behind. What caused it? Carelessness by workers, a stray spark, or a carefully planned act of sabotage? To this day, no answer exists. Today, the tragedy is rarely remembered. It has faded into the shadows of the Civil War, left as a forgotten epilogue to its horrors. But for historians and for those who once lived in its wake, a wound remains, just like the crater in Mobile's earth, still filled with water and silence, as if guarding its secret. A century and a half later, we are still asking the same question. Was the Mobile explosion a tragic accident, or the war's final strike in a conflict that was supposed to be over?
On the morning of February 3rd, 1971, South Georgia woke to the usual shift whistle at the Thiokol plant near Woodbine, where workers in the long building M132 hand-assembled signal flares and trip flares for the Army. In that shop, small fires were almost routine, more like work stoppages than emergencies. Toss sand, turn a valve, crack a window, then get back to it. But one spark ran along the conveyor and into the trays, turning the ordinary into something deadly. The flame grew taller, reached the cure room, packed tight with finished compounds and thousands of flares, and in seconds, a chain of pops turned into a fireball and shockwave. The first blast shot fire so high, pilots saw it in the sky. The second ripped facades off the building. The third hurled burning debris into the woods, setting them ablaze. Windows cracked on the nearby highway, dishes rattled in kitchens, and smoke rolled out like a black river through ditches and cuts in the land. On the asphalt, it left behind scorched shoes and shredded cloth. There weren't enough trained crews nearby, but there was enough grit. Volunteers showed up first, then firefighters from neighboring states. Pickup trucks became ambulances. Army helicopters hovered above. And in the hospitals, something broke quietly but profoundly. Partitions that once divided patients by skin color collapsed, because a triage room doesn't ask questions when seconds decide. Stretchers rolled to wherever there was light and space. Nurses hid exhaustion behind brief smiles. Doctors held scalpels for as long as the day demanded. Life itself became the only argument. Governor Jimmy Carter arrived at the plant, listening to reports against the backdrop of molten concrete, where the words "flammable but not explosive" sounded bitterest of all. The harsh truth surfaced later. 3 weeks before the blast, the Army had reclassified the material from flammable to explosive. That shift changed how it had to be stored, how workers were trained, and how evacuation plans were written. It could have saved lives, but the notice got buried in paperwork. It never reached the women on the line. Investigators named 3 causes: the wrong classification, stockpiling along the line like a long fuse, and weak fire protection inside. Most of the dead were black women from nearby communities, homes drafty with red clay yards and heavy work. The lawsuits began while hospital blankets still smelled of smoke. But they ran into state law that blocked workers from suing employers, steering them into compensation claims. So the fight shifted federal. If the government knew the classification had changed and failed to tell the contractor, then the United States shared responsibility. That's how claims under the Federal Tort Claims Act were born. 17 years of paperwork turned into delayed and never enough payments. But they left a mark on the law. Silence about risk isn't an oversight. It's a criminal cause of tragedy. At the plant gates, a granite marker bears the names. Every February, people come, singing, praying, remembering.
29 people were killed, most of them black women working the assembly line, and about 50 more were injured, with burns and blast trauma among the wounds. The explosion leveled building M132, including its cure room and storage bays, leaving behind nothing but a charred steel frame and a scatter of scrap. Nearby sections of the plant partially collapsed and burned. The shockwave blew out windows and damaged facades across a wide radius. Stanza Pine went up in flames. A column of smoke rose so high it could be seen for miles, choking highways and overwhelming hospitals in the nearest towns.
Industry took notes. Behind the dry phrase, hazard classification, stand real things. Spacing between shelves, the type of sprinklers, where to go when there's a small fire. The Woodbine lesson is about tomorrow morning. The phone call that has to get through, the voice that has to be heard, the doors that have to open on time, and the people who have to make it home. If that lesson stays alive, memory of the tragedy will not be only grief, but the reason why somewhere else, a small fire never becomes a catastrophe.